What are some of the most interesting solved mysteries? The disappearance of Julian Butchwald and Carolyn Watson. I first heard this mystery on the Casfile podcast. If you'd rather listen and allow the conclusion to be a surprise, two people go on a picnic, only for them to be carjacked and kidnapped. Threatening notes are found at the homes of the missing people's families, implying a satanic cult is somehow involved. They wander Australian bushland for over a week until they are found. What happened? Spoilers: the boyfriend staged the whole thing. He got out of the car to check on something and then, disguised in a balaclava, he kidnapped and tied up his girlfriend and took her out into the bush. He later found her, claiming he'd also been kidnapped. He staged the whole thing to bring them closer together and to convince her to have sex with him. The death of Azaria Chamberlain. She was a 2-month-old girl who disappeared while camping with her parents near Uluru. Prosecutors successfully tried her mother for murder and father as an accessory. During the entire ordeal, it was insisted by her mother that Azaria was taken by dingoes, native wild dogs in Australia. This was disregarded, as before this there were no records of dingoes showing any hostility towards humans or causing any attacks or fatalities nearby. Several years later, an unrelated search not far from the campground found a child's coat, of the exact brand and description Azaria's mother gave to the police, in an area littered with dingo dens. The parents' conviction was overturned and the case was established that in reality, she had been taken from her parents' tent during the night, held and eaten by dingoes. Edit. Clarifications and changed from a hiker to unrelated search to be accurate. Second edit. Yes, this is where the "a dingo ate my baby" joke, and its derivatives, came from. Why do North American pronghorn antelope run so fast? They run way faster than any predator in NA. So what was the selective pressure that endowed pronghorn with such incredible speed? Turns out that there used to be a large speedy cat that chased pronghorn, but the cat went extinct at the end of the last ice age along with much of the other NA megafauna. This cat is sometimes referred to as the NA cheetah, but it was not closely related to African cheetah. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Japanese citizens disappeared. It came to light many years later that North Korea had abducted them. Here's one that, at least to me, started as a mystery, then sort of wasn't, but then turned into a weirder story. Ted the Caver. It was a random website that had like a GeoCities or Angel Fire URL of this guy's weird journal from caving near his home. I saw it on a message board or something. Like late 90s or early 2000s. It got creepier and creepier, and included pics, and then just ended. You should read it if you like horror fiction, cause I'll ruin the story here. I guess it was like found footage but in writing. So I wasn't sure if it was real until near the end, at which point I was pretty sure it was fake. He had all sorts of pics that made you almost certain it was real. I remember it taking many hours to read. The weirder part is the stories of who wrote it. At first it gets claimed to come from a different story by some well-known author, but the website guy just chopped off the end and put it online, plagiarizing most. This was accepted for many years. The real story had a shitty, demon-like ending and made the overall tale way worse. But then it turned out that the well-known author had plagiarized it. He admitted it or something, but they couldn't find the actual author of the website. Did he actually disappear as the website alleged? I think there were other weird turns, but then it turned out the original author was just a guy who owned the website and tried writing a short story online, and he wasn't aware of all the copies and he had no idea people had been trying to figure out who wrote it for years. Loch Ness Monster, Nessie. Long story short, it was fake Photoshop. The guy was trying to bring tourists to his small hometown. I remember being excited about him, thinking he might be the last dinosaur alive on this planet. Darwin found an orchid that seemed to have no pollinator. The orchid's nectar required that its pollinator have an abnormally large proboscis, sucky thingy. The moth that pollinates the orchid was discovered after Darwin's death. That's actually a great example of the power of science. Darwin predicted that such a moth must exist based on the orchid needing a pollinator to co-evolve with. The idea was posthumously validated when the moth was found. The McStay family disappearance. The parents and 2 kids disappeared in California. The theory was they had gone to Mexico to start a new life. The mom was kind of sketchy. There were internet searches found on the home computer on Mexico. There was even a video from the border crossing that kinda looked like them. But their bodies were found buried in the desert. It turns out the dad's business partner killed the whole family and buried them in shallow graves. Sad, but at least their families know what happened and won't be searching for them for years. The Green River Kriller. For those interested, the Green River Kriller was the name given to serial killer Gary Ridgway. The name comes about from the first 5 victims, who were all found in the Green River in Washington state. He dumped the bodies in groups usually, and would sometimes leave false evidence tying to other people to confuse the police. He first became a suspect in the killings in 1983, but wasn't caught until 20 years later when DNA collected from the crime scenes was linked to DNA samples he had given in 1987. In total, he confessed to 71 murders, and was convicted of 49. Also interesting to note, one of the investigators on the case interviewed Ted Bundy, and got his insight into the murders. Bundy suggested the Kriller was probably coming back to have sex with the dead bodies. Which turned out to be true. Whenever police would come across a freshly dumped corpse, they would stake it out in hopes of catching the Kriller returning. Area 51 Roswell. At the very start of the Cold War, knowing that the Soviets and other major powers would all be racing to develop nukes after their devastating use at the end of WWII, the US government became interested in extreme high altitude surveillance, figuring flying above what fighter planes and missiles could hit to be the safest way to spy on other countries in the days before satellites. And thus, UFO sightings were born. The Roswell incident came from Project Mogul, an attempt to fit ordinary weather balloons with sophisticated spy electronics to detect Soviet atomic testing. One of their specially fitted weather balloons crashed, and the cover-up was it's just an ordinary weather balloon, meaning no secret spy equipment here. But after balloon, rocket, and spy plane experiment sightings became more and more common, Roswell started to take on its extraterrestrial fame. The project was followed up by Project Genetrix, which did get deployed, and proved the inability to direct a balloon's flight meant they weren't as useful as expected, but did lead to the development of film capable of capturing images in space. Groom Lake Testing Facility, coded as Area 51, theorized, but not proven, to be named according to the Atomic Energy Commission system to further hide its purpose, was the proving grounds for high-altitude, Cold War spy stealth planes, most famously the U-2, SR-71, and F-117. Never before had planes flown that high, and so were instantly dismissed as it can't possibly be a plane. The facility would later be used for testing captured enemy craft, like MiGs. It's fascinating to me not for how anticlimactically mundane it all is, but due to getting to see human nature at work, a modern, contemporary example of how mythologies come to be. All around Reddit, and the wider world, ancient cultures get mocked as dumb for not understanding something and so ascribing an explanation that makes sense given their understanding of the world. Yet here we are, modern man, doing the same damn thing, and ascribing to ancient humanity traits based on our lack of understanding of them while we're at it. For ages it was assumed the ancient Egyptians were doing some religious nonsense, emptying a vase on around the giant stone blocks used in the pyramids, until somebody got the bright idea to test the friction levels of Saharan sand at various levels of wetness, finding that if wet to just the right consistency big, heavy blocks could slide right across it. So much for ancient Egyptians being dumb. Mythology, religion, and UFOs, what a weird trio. It couldn't possibly be a plane. Planes don't fly that high. Balloons aren't metallic, and when the balloons couldn't be seen but the equipment could, large antenna dishes, everybody knows nothing like that hangs from balloons, so it can't possibly be that. There must be something deeper. Ultimately, humanity loves a good mystery so much that it's not about to let pesky things like truth get in the way of imagination. Dark Side of Moon. In 1959, the Soviet spacecraft Lunar 3 took the first pictures of the mysterious dark side of the moon. To widespread surprise, the previously unseen lunar surface contained almost none of the large dark areas, known as lunar Maria or seas, that dominate the familiar side of the moon. In fact, Maria make up only around 2% of the dark side of the moon. And a mystery was born. Maria are actually large basaltic plains formed by volcanic activity. A consensus eventually formed that a thicker crust prevented Maria from forming on the dark side. But that didn't really solve the central mystery. Why was the dark side of the moon different from the side that faces us? Why was the crust so thick there? The question remained unanswered for over 50 years, but astrophysicist Jason Wright now claims to have cracked the case. There is an existing theory that the moon was formed from the debris scattered when a Mars-sized object collided with the Earth. The collision would also have created an enormous amount of heat. Since it's much smaller than the Earth, the moon would have been faster to cool off, but the side of the moon facing Earth would have been warmed by the heat radiating out from the molten planet. The faster cooling process on the moon's far side created the thick crust that kept lava from reaching the surface. Astronomers usually dislike the term dark side of the moon since both sides receive the same amount of light from the sun, but it seems as though the far side genuinely was once darker, thanks to being shielded from the smoldering Earth. The mystery of the Iron Pillar at Qutb complex. This was made about 1600 years ago by Gupta dynasty, and how the pillar got moved to Delhi is also a mystery apart from its metallurgical mystery. It is known for standing for all those years with very less, any corrosion, the reason for which is hidden in the practices made by ancient Indians in preparation of iron. The mystery, which was unsolved for 1600 years, was uncovered lately by a group from IIT Kanpur, which said that high amount of phosphorus present in the iron made it to form a layer which resistant to corrosion. Murder of Bobby Kent in 1993 in Florida. No one could figure out why they would kill a promising, young, affluent boy with many friends. Turns out his best friend had conspired with his girlfriend and several others to kill him. He was abusing his best friend, beating and berating him constantly, as well as his girlfriend, calling her fat, ugly, slutty. His best friend, who more saw of him as a mortal enemy that he had to deal with due to knowing him so long, didn't want to take it anymore, and with the insistence of his girlfriend hired a hitman. On backstory, him and his best friend were involved in weird stuff, creating gay porn through blackmail and trying to sell it off in local shops, shooting steroids. Bobby also allegedly raped his best friend's girlfriend's friend, leading to multiple people pissed off he was living. Eventually they lured him down to local swamp under the pretext of a romantic encounter with the girl he allegedly raped. They then stabbed him, with his best friend dealing most of the damage, and killed him by slitting his throat and hitting him in the face with a baseball bat. They, being a group of teens, began to crack quickly, and eventually the girlfriend's cousin confessed, leading to their arrests. They all served jail time, with the best friend being on death row for a while. TL. Dr. No one could figure out why such a nice kid would be murdered. Turns out he was a big dick who blackmailed and treated his friends like shit, and they didn't take it very well. Air France Flight 447, for no explainable reason at the time a plane flying from France to South America crashed in the Atlantic off Brazil. It was a while before the wreckage was located and the cause found. It turned out to be a frozen airspeed indicator, pitot tube, and the co-pilot ignored all other speed instrumentation, GPS etc., and was convinced the plane was stalling, so pointed the nose down to gain speed. Then cascading issues, including who was in control when the captain returned, led to the crash of a perfectly plane with no serious actual problem. I'm sure there's many other airplane mysteries, but that one was memorable. The mystery behind the Bermuda Triangle is that there's no mystery at all. That section of ocean is no more dangerous than any other of equal size. There has yet to be a major disappearance there in this century. The assassination of JFK and the mystery of how Oswald managed to get off 3 shots and what happened to the first shot he fired. People had 4 years been allocating too little time between the first and third shot, leading to speculation about multiple gunmen, but as it turns out, the first shot fired was earlier than thought. It probably hit the traffic light at the intersection and ricocheted down the road, hitting a bystander in the angle. Also the mystery of what happened to HMAS Sydney during WW2 and why none of her crew survived.